3 years ago, I fell. Not from a ladder, not on a slippery road. I fell simply getting up from a mat in my workshop. Just getting up, and I couldn't. I lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, and the first thing I thought was not, "I'm in pain." The first thing I thought was, "This is the end." 3 years later, I climbed a mountain. The same legs, the same man, 78 years old. And I'm going to tell you exactly what changed. Not expensive clinics, not pills. 6 things I do every day, right here in our old neighborhood in Kyoto, and they brought back what I thought was lost forever. My name is Kenji. For 40 years I made furniture with my hands, and I thought I knew my body until that evening. A year before the fall, something began to slip away, not suddenly, slowly, like water leaking from a clay jar through a crack you can't see. And the worst part wasn't that my legs became weaker. The worst part was that I stopped trusting them. I remember one moment. I was standing in my workshop, holding a plane, a tool I had used thousands of times, and I realized I couldn't bend down to pick up a shaving from the floor. Just bend down. I stood there looking at that shaving, and something inside me tightened so hard it took my breath away. Not from pain, from shame. After that October evening, my son took me to a doctor. The doctor said what they probably say to everyone: "Your legs are getting weaker, it's normal, be careful." Prescribed something for the joints. I walked home thinking, so that's it. Now carefully, slowly, holding on to walls, until the end. I'm 75, and I'm being told to protect myself from my own legs. That winter, I barely left the house. The workshop stayed closed. I sat by the window and every morning watched my neighbor Toshiro, he was 81 at the time, walk into the hills behind our neighborhood. No cane, no hurry, just walking, straight, steady, alive. I couldn't understand how that was possible. One morning I called out to him over the fence, "Toshiro, tell me honestly, don't your legs hurt?" He stopped, looked at me, not with pity, no, with a slight surprise, like you look at someone asking a question that always had an obvious answer. "They hurt," he said. "Of course they hurt. They're 81 years old, Kenji. But I don't ask them not to hurt. I ask them to work. Do you understand the difference?" I thought about those words for a long time, during long January nights when the house was quiet and you could hear the old beams creaking in the wind. To work, not to be young, not to be painless, just to work. One day, Toshiro invited me for a morning walk. I stepped outside, holding on to the gate, angry at myself, and he showed me something, right there on our narrow street, not in a hospital, not in a gym, on the cobblestones between old houses, while a cat warmed itself on a stone fence. 6 things, so simple it felt almost embarrassing, and they changed everything. The first thing he showed me I took as a joke. "Squat down," he said. "Toshiro, I'd barely made it out of the house." "I know," he said. "That's why you should." A deep squat, something our grandfathers did every day without even thinking. Sitting like that to weed a garden, fix a wooden fence, or just rest by the road. In our neighborhood, you can still see old men sitting like that outside their homes, waiting for the kettle to boil, or watching the world go by. I tried. My legs shook. I grabbed his hand. "Hold on," he said calmly. "Today, hold on. Tomorrow, less. in a month on your own. At first, 20 seconds with support. That was my limit. But after just a few days, I noticed something strange. I began to feel my legs differently, not as traitors, as something alive that had grown tired of doing nothing and was, now, slowly, carefully, waking up. Muscles I had forgotten about reminded themselves, not with pain, with warmth. I did it every morning, 3 or 4 times, adding 10 seconds each week, the way I had been taught to work with wood. Don't rush the material, or it will crack. After a month, I stood up from a chair, just stood up without thinking about it. The second lesson came on the next walk. Toshiro suddenly stopped by a lamp-post, closed his eyes, and lifted one leg. He just stood there, on one leg, eyes closed, in the middle of the street. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Teaching my body to remember where it is." I understood later when I tried it myself. When you stand on 2 legs, the body gets lazy. Balance happens automatically. But take away one support and everything changes. Dozens of small muscles around the ankle, knee, and hips suddenly wake up. They remember they exist. Those are the muscles that save you from falling, not the big ones, the small ones. When you trip and catch yourself, it's them. When you walk in the dark and don't fall, them. When you step off a bus on a slippery surface, again, them. I started doing it every time I brushed my teeth, one leg, then the other. At first next to the sink, then without support, 10 seconds, then more. And something began to change, not only in my legs, in my mind. I started walking differently, not fearing every step. The third thing didn't come from Toshiro. It came from childhood, from the schoolyard. I remembered it one of those January days, sitting by the window. Our physical education teacher used to make us stand in a low, wide stance, feet wider than shoulders, knees bent, back straight, and just stand there. We laughed. What kind of training is that without movement? Now I understand. I stood up from the table, spread my legs, bent my knees as if sitting on an invisible chair, straightened my back, tightened my abdomen, just stood there. After 20 seconds, my thighs started burning. After a minute, it was real work, without a single step, without jumping, without any equipment I didn't have anyway. Just me, my muscles, and a surprising discovery. I was still capable of this. My body still remembered what effort feels like. Toshiro later told me that in old martial arts schools, this stance was called training the spirit through the body. Not because it's complicated, but because it teaches you to endure, not to run from the first burn, to breathe, to stay, to continue. I started with 15 seconds 3 times a day while water boiled, then a minute, then more. And one day I realized this ability to stay when it's hard is what separates those who age with dignity from those who give up too early. It's not about muscles, it's about character. The fourth thing I discovered myself. One morning, about 2 months after all this began, I was walking through the neighborhood and suddenly caught myself thinking, I'm not thinking about how I walk. I'm just walking. I stopped in the middle of the street and listened to how my heel touched the old stone, how the weight shifted to the middle of the foot, how the toes pushed off and the body gently moved forward, a movement I had done millions of times in my life and never noticed. From that day, I began to walk slowly on purpose, not because I had to, but because in that slowness there was something I had been missing for years, full presence in my own body. Heel, middle, toe, Inhale for 3 steps, exhale for 3. At first it felt awkward, a grown man moving as if afraid to wake a cat. Neighbors looked. Let them look. After a week, I noticed something. Those little catch-myself moments that used to happen every few steps almost disappeared. The body remembered how to hold itself in space. 3 minutes a day, just 3 minutes, but every day. The 5th thing struck me by coincidence. I was standing in a line at a shop near my house for a long time, about 20 minutes, and suddenly noticed Toshiro in front of the cashier. He was standing and almost imperceptibly, almost mechanically, rising onto his toes and lowering himself, again and again, slowly, with a small pause at the top. I watched him and thought, this is the secret. Not in some special exercise, but in the fact that he never just stands still. Every minute of waiting is work, quiet, invisible, constant. The calf muscles are the second heart of our body. When they contract, blood moves upward from the legs. Without them, it stagnates. The legs swell. The vessels suffer. Fatigue comes already by midday. I started doing the same, in line, at the bus stop, while heating soup. Slowly up, pause, slowly down. After a few weeks, the heaviness in my legs in the evening started coming later, then almost disappeared. When I told Toshiro about it, he simply nodded. The body does not like being ignored, he said. The 6th thing was the hardest for me, not physically, mentally. One day Toshiro brought me to the wall of my own house. Lean your back against the wall, he said, and slide down, slowly, until you feel like you are sitting on an invisible chair. I did it. The first time I lasted 8 seconds. 8 seconds. Me, who built furniture with my bare hands. Me, who carried heavy boards across the workshop. 8 seconds against the wall, and my legs started shaking. I wanted to stand up and walk away, out of shame. But Toshiro told me that day something that I have repeated to myself ever since. Kenji, he said, your whole life you measured yourself by what you could do at 40. Stop. Start measuring yourself by what you can do today compared to yesterday. That is the only thing that matters. 8 seconds, then 10, then 15, then 3 sets of 30, then a minute. Now 1.5 minutes 3 times a day, and I walk up the stairs to my workshop without holding the railing, just like that, like before. And the last thing, Toshiro called it not an exercise, but a gift to the body. A pull-up bar in the park, 10 minutes away. One morning he took me there. Just hang, he said. I hung, and I felt something I did not expect. My spine, which for years had been compressed by weight, from work, from age, from worries, suddenly stretched out, slowly, like old paper unfolding under warmth. It was not just relief for the body. It felt like the fatigue of the past years loosened its grip a little. I hung for 5 seconds, then 10, now 30 seconds, 3 sets in the morning, when the park is almost empty. My shoulders move again as they should. My back stopped hurting at night. And every time I hang on that bar and feel my fingers holding my entire weight, I feel something very important. Control, strength, presence. I am here. I am holding on. I am not falling. Last week, Toshiro and I climbed a mountain.
I will not tell you it was easy. I stopped. I breathed heavily. At one turn I had to lean against a rock. But I made it. On my own legs, which are 78 years old, which 3 years ago could not lift me from the mat. I stood at the top and looked at our neighborhood, the small tiled roofs, the river, the winding streets I know by heart, and I thought about that evening when I lay on the workshop floor, staring at the ceiling, about how I thought, this is the end. It was not the end. It was the beginning. The workshop is open again. Last week I finished a small cedar table for my grandson. I sat on the floor, as I always did, legs crossed, bent over my work. I stood up when I finished. I just stood up, without thinking whether I could. I want to tell you something, not as a doctor, not as a scientist, as a man who was on that floor. The body hears everything you think about it. If you think it betrays you, it will betray you. If you start working with it, patiently, without expecting miracles, it remembers. Muscles remember. They are waiting to be asked. You don't need to run marathons. You don't need to lift heavy weights. You don't need to do things that cause pain. You just need to not let yourself fade. Every day, little by little, without rushing. Right now, when this video ends, try one thing. Stand up, hold the back of a chair, and lower yourself into a squat as far as you can. Stay for 10 seconds. Stand up. That's the beginning. I lay on the floor, thinking I was looking at the ceiling for the last time as a man who could still stand. I was wrong, and I am very glad I was wrong. Take care of yourself and of those who are with you.